John F. Kennedy Jr. was the media crown prince of America's royal family.
And nobody comes close to the Kennedys.
And heir to its multi-million-dollar fortune.
He inherited tens of millions of dollars when his mother passed away.
The world is shocked and in mourning when JFK Jr.'s plane plunges into the ocean, killing him, his wife, and his sister-in-law.
It took 3 long days before they found that plane, and when they did, everyone's hopes were dashed.
But what of his fortune?
JFK Jr. was using the money to support his lifestyle and presumably his wife's lifestyle as well.
Will battles ensue?
They ended up bringing a wrongful death lawsuit against John F. Kennedy Jr.'s estate.
The fame, the fortune, the legacy of John F. Kennedy Jr. John F. Kennedy Jr. is one of 2 children born to President John F. Kennedy and Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy, joining the Kennedy family dynasty. Handsome and wealthy, JFK Jr. epitomizes an American prince, and the media and public follow his every move.
Politics isn't dry. It isn't dull. So why should a magazine that covers it be?
Some anticipate his involvement in politics, but most just wonder where the wayward prince will end up. He's a charity advocate and a frustrated actor who spends his life trying to make something of himself outside the shadow of his father.
JFK Jr. had a passion for acting, but his mother discouraged it.
Then on July 16, 1999, his plane plunges into the Atlantic, killing Kennedy, his wife Carolyn Bessette, and her sister Lauren Bessette. And not only that, but it appears to be JFK Jr.'s fault.
The National Transportation Safety Board determined that John F. Kennedy Jr. was the cause of the crash.
At the time of Kennedy's death, his life was really going downhill. He was feuding with his sister over his mother's estate. His political magazine, George, was hemorrhaging money, and he was on the brink of divorce. So his fairy tale life was actually turning into a nightmare.
As legacies go, JFK Jr.'s couldn't be more monumental. This is the story of all that he left behind. John F. Kennedy Jr. is an American blue blood, but he makes very little of his own money. What he does make, he gives to charity or spends. Only son of former President John F. Kennedy and bearer of his name, John Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr. is born on November 25, 1960, 17 days after his father is named president. The Kennedy fortune and status was created by JFK Jr.'s grandfather, Joseph Kennedy, through banking, the stock market, real estate, politics, and liquor. It's been valued at $500 million and spread among his 7 living children and their families.
The patriarch of this family, Joseph Kennedy, was determined to live the American dream. He worked hard investing in different businesses and made a lot of personal wealth.
In 1960, the Kennedy families are among the country's wealthiest.
The Kennedy family is like America's political royalty. They are glamorous, they are entertaining, they're tragic, they're flawed, and they have been dedicated to public service.
So from the moment JFK was born, he spent his whole life in the White House, and he earned the name John, which was actually given to him by a journalist, not by his own family. The rumor has it that the president was overheard saying John in quick succession, and that's how the name was born.
Then, on the 22nd of November 1963, his father, President John F. Kennedy, is assassinated. 3 days later, on Kennedy Jr.'s 3rd birthday, a state funeral is held. As the casket is carried out of St. Matthew's Cathedral, young Kennedy gives his father a farewell salute.
He had charisma. He was a great leader and a motivator, and he called upon the American people to serve each other and to help our country grow, and people were mesmerized by him. He married this beautiful, elegant, refined woman, Jackie, and together they painted this very romantic, glamorous picture of politics. There were so many hopes and dreams that people had invested in him. They felt personally connected to him and to this romantic, beautiful family. And as the casket went by and we saw Jackie Kennedy with the black veil over her face, and then the 2 young children, John Jr. and Caroline, our hearts went out to them. We realized what a personal loss it was for them. And then when we saw little John put his hand up to his forehead and give his daddy a salute, I think everyone's heart broke as they watched that little boy realizing that he was going to grow up without this great man that we had all come to know.
Shortly after the funeral, Kennedy moves with his mother and sister from Washington to New York City. There, he lives in a palatial 5,300 square foot, 15-room apartment on Fifth Avenue that overlooks both Central Park and the Metropolitan Museum of Art. In New York, Kennedy attends the exclusive collegiate school. During elementary school, when he's just 7 years old, Kennedy's mother marries Greek shipping tycoon Aristotle Onassis. In remarrying, Jackie must forfeit a fund from the Kennedy family, which amounts to $175,000 yearly, and also a $10,000 annual widow's pension. So Onassis offers his new bride $3 million to be his wife. And he also secures a $1 million trust fund for John Jr. and Caroline. They also both retain their trust funds from the Kennedy estate. Then, 3 years later, when Kennedy is just 14, his stepfather dies from an autoimmune neuromuscular disease. Unfortunately, due to Greek estate laws, Kennedy's mother is not entitled to the fortune she expected. After 2 years, she accepts $26 million from her husband's estate on the proviso that she makes no further claims on his money.
Well, the problem here is that Jackie O had a prenuptial agreement, which really limited what she could inherit. But it was actually interesting. The Greek laws favored a spouse, even one with a prenuptial agreement, and said they could get 12.5%, which would have been $125 million. Yet Jackie O settled for $26 million because there were rumors that he was going to divorce her or separate from her right before he passed away. So it's surprising that she only settled for $26 million. Is it because she already had plenty of money of her own, or did she want to stop some embarrassing rumors from coming out about her? We really don't know.
By the time her son is 17, Kennedy's mother decides it's about time John got his hands dirty. She arranges for him to spend the summer of 1978 in Wyoming, working as a wrangler at the Bar Cross Ranch for 6 weeks. The following year, Kennedy's mother pays John's annual tuition to send him to Brown University.
John was always trying to balance that line between pleasing his mother, who he loved very much, but also being his own man and finding his own way. Choosing Brown University as opposed to something like Harvard University might have been another little rebellion, but it was still a good enough place that his mother would accept it and be happy with him.
At Brown, he discovers a love for acting, performing in a number of university plays. It's also there he meets Sally Monroe, who soon becomes his first long-term girlfriend.
Now, though Sally is an artist type who can fill JFK Jr.'s head with inappropriate non-political thoughts, Jackie does approve of her.
In the summer of 1981, Kennedy gets his first paying job in politics. He works at Terry Sanford's Center for Democratic Policy and is reportedly paid $100 a week. The next summer, Kennedy volunteers teaching English to students with low-income families at the University of Connecticut. Kennedy regularly works on the family charities, including Aunt Jean Kennedy Smith's very special arts program for people with learning disabilities.
At times, JFK Jr. seems to spend lavishly, and yet he rides around on a $100 pair of rollerblades and gives lots of money to charity.
He gains a lot of work experience, but very little earning experience. He graduates Brown University in 1983 with a bachelor's degree in history, and the following year lands a solid paying job. Kennedy works for the New York City Office of Business Development. During this time, he dabbles in acting, performing in plays such as Brian Friel's Winners at Manhattan's Irish Arts Center. Kennedy is a natural on stage, despite his mother's obvious disapproval of acting as a suitable profession for a member of their family. Mixing with actors like Ali Sheedy and Rob Lowe, Kennedy dreams of a career on the big screen.
John was really fascinated with acting and with the whole entertainment world. And he dabbled in this. In college, he did some acting in plays. After he graduated from college, he was kind of trying to find his way, and he wanted to get into acting. Supposedly, his mother threatened him that if he did, she would disinherit him.
But later that year, he caves to his mother's wishes.
Eventually, he ended up going to law school at NYU, and that was a way for him to satisfy what his mother wanted, and also perhaps dip his toe into the political arena that so many people were pressuring him to do.
He had a very big sense of duty to his family and to the legacy, so he opted to stay in law school. That was the natural progression and the natural first step to get into politics.
It was a compromise for him to be able to look like he was preparing for the political world, but also do something that might prepare him for what he wanted to do, which was more entrepreneurial, perhaps more performance. Being a trial attorney, which is what he did, is a type of acting for many people.
It's while performing in the play Winners that Kennedy meets and falls in love with Christina Haig.
So Haig and Kennedy are playing lovers in an off-Broadway play. And one evening at his mother's New Jersey estate, he pulls her close and says to her, "I'd like to kiss you for real this time."
In an effort to impress her, he buys a motorcycle to ferry her to and from play rehearsals. Shortly after, the bike is stolen, but Kennedy doesn't care. He only bought it to get his girl. While JFK Jr. has a natural talent with the ladies, he's not so adept when it comes to money. The following year, when a 26-year-old Kennedy can't get a first-class ticket to West Palm Beach, he buys 2 coach seats instead, one for himself and one for his guitar. He also enrolls at the Plus One Fitness Club in Soho, where for $6,000 a year, he works out with the likes of Cher and Bernadette Peters. But in 1987, he lands a position at the Justice Department in Washington as a summer intern, where he earns $353 a week.
Now, though he's barely earned a cent of his own money, everything Kennedy touches glitters with gold. Plus, everyone loves John, and who can blame them? He's very kind to his family, always willing to help them, and he's very kind to the paparazzi.
Finally, in 1988, Kennedy gets his best-paying job to date at the LA law firm of Mannett, Phelps, Rothenberg, and Phillips. There, he earns $1,100 a week as a summer associate, and also attends fundraisers, such as roller skating parties for the inner city. Kennedy's grandfather, Joseph Kennedy, was a powerful businessman and a political dignitary who created the Kennedy Empire. Yet all his grandson seems to want to do is spend it. How long can JFK Jr. skate by on his good looks and charm before his money runs out? John F. Kennedy Jr., son of the most loved family in American politics and heir to its famous name, has spent the last 28 years consuming rather than augmenting the Kennedy millions on motorbikes, exclusive gym memberships, and airline tickets for his guitar. On top of this, he's racked up $2,000 in outstanding parking tickets.
Many people look to John as the next Kennedy to step up and really take a big place in American politics. A lot of people looked forward to his development as an adult to see what he was going to do. He got the law degree, so it looked like he was heading in that direction. When he took the stage at the Democratic National Convention in 1988 to endorse his uncle, Ted Kennedy, everyone watched, hoping that this was going to be the first step into politics for John Kennedy Jr. He looked great, he sounded great, and it was like he was living up to all the dreams that everyone had for him. And yet he still wasn't quite ready to take on that mantle. When people would ask him about, "Are you going to go into politics?" he said, "Not now, but maybe on down the road."
Shortly after graduating law school in 1989, Kennedy decides to give more of his money away, this time to improve the care of the mentally handicapped by forming the charity Reaching Up.
The Kennedy children were raised with the understanding that they had been given much and they needed to give much. So JFK Jr.'s charity facilitated putting both of those things together.
Kennedy helps develop a series of courses at the City University of New York to train people to work with the disabled. Around this time, things start to cool with Christina Haig. Despite his dashing good looks and being crowned the sexiest man alive by People magazine, Kennedy is not the ladies' man his father and uncles were always rumored to be. While he does have a brief fling with actress Sarah Jessica Parker, what he's really looking for is the one. Enter Daryl Hannah, friend of the family, from good breeding, and an actress. It's not long before the two become a New York power couple.
They look fabulous together. By all accounts, they're having this amazing relationship. John plans to join Hannah as an actor, but Jackie still won't have it.
For 5 years, JFK Jr. dated Daryl Hannah, and this was over all the tabloids. Everyone was talking about it. Everyone was wondering, is JFK Jr. just going to turn his back on the political world of his family, ignore the legacy that everyone saw for him, and head off to Hollywood and be in this romantic relationship with Daryl Hannah? It was a very trying time for his mother, Jackie.
There are rumors that Kennedy's mother threatens to disinherit him if he becomes an actor. Kennedy continues with his studies. Yet after earning his degree, he fails the New York bar exam twice.
John F. Kennedy Jr., after graduating from law school, took the bar, and he failed. Much to his chagrin, then he took it again, and he failed again.
Kennedy had landed a job as assistant district attorney, earning $30,000, and he was told point blank that if he failed a third time, he would be fired.
Some people thought he would just give up after that, but he didn't. And to his credit, he took it for a third time, and he passed. I'm sure it was a humbling experience for John F. Kennedy Jr., who typically got pretty much anything he wanted on the first try.
On a paltry annual salary, subsidized by a dwindling trust fund, Kennedy moves into Hannah's sprawling Upper West Side apartment. From there, he commutes to and from work, not via a chauffeur-driven car like other members of his family, on his trusty bicycle. Though frugal with his modes of transportation, this is never the case for Kennedy when it comes to charity. In 1991, he joins the Robin Hood Foundation, a group of Wall Street millionaires that donate more than $1 million each month to New York City's impoverished children. Kennedy is enthusiastically involved, donating a large chunk of his own money and initiating contact with underprivileged schools. On July 8, 1993, Kennedy resigns from his job as assistant district attorney with no plans for future paid employment.
Usually walking away from a promising career isn't a good move for anybody, but this is a Kennedy we're talking about.
That same summer, Kennedy and Hannah take out a California marriage license, planning to marry in Santa Monica. But before they can wed, Kennedy's mother, Jackie Onassis, is diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Her children insist she stop her 3-pack-a-day smoking habit. She does, but it's of little consequence. 4 months later, on May 19, 1994, Jackie dies in her sleep.
My mother passed on. She was surrounded by her friends and her family and her books and the people and the things that she loved.
Although Kennedy is devastated, Jackie's death is a boon for her son's pocketbook. His mother leaves her children a $43.7 million fortune, including her 15-room Fifth Avenue apartment and the 366-acre Kennedy estate on Martha's Vineyard.
This further cushioned his lifestyle and finances, giving him less of an incentive to earn a living, and he was still able to keep up with the Kennedy lifestyle.
With fresh millions in his pocket, Kennedy buys a 2,400 square foot loft in a former commercial building. Situated in the eclectic neighborhood of Tribeca, the property costs him $700,000. He also hires a personal assistant and publicist, Rosemarie Terenzio. Then, Kennedy breaks up with Daryl Hannah.
They were the perfect couple, planning a marriage, but some say Kennedy was actually obsessed with Hannah. Now others say she kept pursuing him to secure the date.
1 year after his mother's death, Kennedy and his sister sell their mother's Fifth Avenue apartment for $9.5 million, 38 times what Onassis bought it for in 1964. Kennedy is now close to $25 million richer. And it's not long before he has another love in his life, Calvin Klein publicist Carolyn Bessette.
So there are two stories on how they met. The first is that they were actually running in Central Park and ran into each other. The second is that he was actually shopping for Calvin Klein suits. Either way, but the moment they laid eyes on each other, they were inseparable.
In 1995, Bessette moves into Kennedy's Tribeca loft. Then, after 2 years unemployed, Kennedy decides it's time to start his own business. A lover of the outdoors, he and friend Michael J. Berman plan to sell kayaks.
Well, this really doesn't seem to be the best business decision. I mean, what kind of market can there be for kayaks? And it's not like kayak users are going to be swayed by the Kennedy name. You'd think he'd lend his name to something that fits a little more with the Kennedy brand.
But eventually, they scrap the kayak idea and settle on running a magazine. Not put off by their lack of publishing experience, Kennedy and Berman form the company Random Ventures. They get $20 million from one of the world's largest magazine publishers, Hachette Philippachi Magazines. And in September 1995, they launched the political lifestyle magazine, George.
I remember when George magazine was revealed to the world. JFK Jr. stood there on that stage and he pulled the blanket off the big cover, and there we saw what George magazine was going to be. It was Cindy Crawford dressed up as George Washington, looking sexy and different from any George Washington you'd ever seen. And right then, we all saw what John F. Kennedy Jr. was trying to do at this magazine. He was making politics cool.
When JFK gushes about his dream to draw the public into relevant politics and upbeat politics through his journalism, the crowd loves it and they roar.
In a time when the price of paper was soaring and 1,600 magazines were coming out a year, George had a very impressive launch. The magazine had an unprecedented 175 pages of advertising and 550,000 copies in its first distribution.
Politics isn't dry. It isn't dull. So why should a magazine that covers it be?
It's the largest magazine launch that year. Average newsstand sales of Hachette's 27 other magazines is 44%. Yet the first issue of George sells 97% of copies, grossing approximately $1.5 million. The second issue sells 78%, grossing around $1.38 million. George, which sometimes takes editorial aim at members of Kennedy's own family, quickly gains the largest circulation of any political magazine in the country. Kennedy sells hundreds of thousands of copies at $2.95 a pop. All profits from George are split between Hachette and Random Ventures. It's the first time in his life Kennedy is earning a solid income. With the inheritance from his mother and Kennedy's new venture, it seems his fortunes are not only stabilizing, but also growing. But will his success continue to climb? America's favorite famous son, John F. Kennedy Jr., may have the support of millions in family money, but he's also proving successful as an entrepreneur. At the helm of his triumphant political magazine, George, he's raking in some real dollars. Buoyed by his prosperity, Kennedy decides to add to his wealth. In April 1996, he and his sister Caroline auction off nearly 1,300 of their mother's possessions. From jewelry to a set of the president's golf clubs, it's the sale of the century. The interest in the auction is unprecedented. The media coverage has the intensity of a sporting event.
It is the Super Bowl of estate sales. Everybody's watching and everybody wants to be involved. Auction House Sotheby's have never seen anything like this before, but as you can expect, that's the magic of the Kennedys.
When it's done, Kennedy and his sister share in $34.5 million. Though Kennedy's finances are only getting better, the same cannot be said for his magazine. By 1996, George is losing money. It's just not getting the advertising revenue or subscribers it needs.
Clearly, there's more to turning a profit to a political magazine than having a Kennedy involved. Now, while the Kennedy name definitely helped, ultimately it didn't save the magazine. And remember, at this point in time, no political magazine had made a profit.
Though the writing's on the wall for George, Kennedy would continue to put money into it for the rest of his life. And that's not the only thing in trouble in his life. Kennedy's relationship seems to be on the rocks. Not growing up with money or fame, Bessette is deeply troubled by the paparazzi's interest in her and her boyfriend, leading to frequent public fighting between the two. Though rumors start swirling of their imminent breakup, on the 21st of September 1996, they surprise the tabloids by secretly getting married on Cumberland Island, Georgia.
So JFK's wedding, of course, is a very classy affair. His sister Caroline is the matron of honor and his cousin Anthony is the best man. With the paparazzi following the couple day and night, it is a mystery how they manage to elude the media on their big day. But they do it, and this keeps Caroline very, very happy.
The Narciso Rodriguez dress Bissette wears requires 2 3-hour fittings in Paris and costs $40,000.
This was one expensive wedding dress. If she wore it for 8 hours, that's about $5,000 an hour or $83 a minute. What girl wouldn't want to wear a dress that expensive? I would.
After the wedding, Kennedy and Bissette go on a lavish honeymoon in Turkey.
Their extravagant honeymoon in Turkey was exactly what people expect from a Kennedy. This is not your typical family. People expect something over the top. And for such an artsy, sophisticated couple, what better place? I mean, the ruins, the flavor, the culture, the architecture, the art, everything about it just fit them so well. I think what would have been inappropriate is them sunning on the beach of Hawaii for their honeymoon. That's just very, very normal. This was not a normal couple.
Then on December 19, 1997, 1 year after they're married, Kennedy draws up a will. His knowledge of the law helps him create a clear and uncomplicated document.
JFK Jr. left the bulk of his estate through a trust, but he did leave some things through a will. In his will, he included his personal property and his real estate. The advantage of JFK Jr. doing a trust was numerous. It allowed him to keep his estate free from the public, private, confidential, and that meant that we didn't all get to know who he was leaving his money to, how he was leaving it to them, and actually how much money was going through that trust.
He makes no mention of his net worth, yet leaves everything to his wife Carolyn, so long as she's still living 30 days after his death.
This is actually a pretty common provision that most people have in their will. So that way, when somebody passes away at the same time as their beneficiary, as unfortunately happened here, it's the first person's wishes that get followed in the will. So John F. Kennedy Jr.'s beneficiaries, per his will, got the money as he wanted them to. What was surprising here, however, was that there was no prenuptial agreement. It's really odd that with this much money at stake in these two high-profile individuals, that there was no prenup whatsoever.
That same year, it's estimated that Kennedy's magazine, George, loses $200,000 an issue.
George's circulation leveled off at about 430,000 copies, which is good, but to make money, a magazine really needs to hit the 500,000 copy mark. And George failed at that, so it didn't become the first ever political magazine to make money. Part of the problem here is that political news is fast moving, so to be a magazine with a monthly format, it's tough to keep up with the fast pace.
With his business failing, Kennedy redirects his energy again, this time into flying lessons.
He had gotten his pilot's license in 1998 in April. And a year later, in April of 1999, he bought this brand new plane, this Piper Saratoga. He had only been flying it a few months. It's a more complex plane, which he was certified to fly. However, he was not instrument rated, which means that he was only supposed to fly when he could visually see what was going on, when it was light outside.
Kennedy is a novice pilot, logging just 36 hours of flight time in his aircraft, only 3 of these without an instructor on board, and only 48 minutes of that flying at night. He has landed his plane just once in darkness. Kennedy admits the only person he can convince to fly with him is his wife. By the summer of 1999, his marriage is apparently in shambles. Bissette is increasingly upset by the paparazzi, and even more so by her husband, who does nothing to protect her from media scrutiny. Quite the opposite, he seems to love the attention.
When they were first married, John did ask the paparazzi to lay off of Caroline because she was a bit camera shy and it kind of freaked her out. But she married a Kennedy, and that goes with the name. That's just a given.
Then, when rumors begin that Kennedy is having an affair with Daryl Hannah, a jealous Bissette flies into a rage and hires a private investigator. She then hires a divorce lawyer. Kennedy and his wife go to counseling. But on July 14th, Bissette storms out of their session, disappearing for 2 days. When she resurfaces, Kennedy orders her out of their Tribeca loft. Kennedy has had enough. He plans to announce their separation, but not until after his cousin Rory's wedding. Until then, Bissette and he will keep up appearances. Unfortunately, Bissette doesn't want to play ball. She tells her husband that she's not going to the wedding.
John had been living in a hotel. They were pretty much separated, and he was waiting until after Rory's wedding to make the announcement because he didn't want to ruin things for his cousin. She was angry about all of this and did not want to even go to the wedding, but her sister Lauren put together a lunch and talked them into having lunch together to just try to make them get along. And she actually offered to go with them if her sister would go, and she's the one that talked her into it.
Kennedy's personal assistant also steps up to the plate, pointing out to Carolyn that not going would only put her in a position of further media scrutiny. Bissette caves. Kennedy arranges to fly himself, Bissette, and her sister Lauren over to Martha's Vineyard, departing at 6 p.m. on Friday, July 16, 1999. Being a beginner pilot, hours before takeoff, he talks through his flight with his instructor.
He only had 36 hours of flight time in his new plane, 33 of which were with his flight instructor. That day, his flight instructor had offered to fly with him when he went to Martha's Vineyard, but for whatever reason, he decided to fly alone. John F. Kennedy Jr. was also flying with injuries to his ankles. He had been using crutches to walk, and so it might have been difficult for him to maintain control over the pedals, which was necessary also to land that plane.
Then, apparently, Lauren has to work late, pushing back their departure time. Then the trio get caught in traffic, pushing back their departure again. It is 8:38 p.m. before they take off from Essex County Airport. A flight that should have been completed in daylight hours now occurs in the dark.
Distracted by his marital problems, failing business, Kennedy then decides to take the shorter route to Martha's Vineyard.
This is over a 30-mile open stretch of water, rather than following the safer path along the lighted coastline of Rhode Island Sound and Buzzards Bay. As American Airlines Flight 1484 approaches Westchester County Airport, Kennedy flies right into its path. Air traffic controllers instruct the American Airlines jet to descend, and a collision is narrowly avoided. Then Kennedy checks in with the FAA tower at Martha's Vineyard Airport in Vineyard Haven, Massachusetts. He is approaching his destination, but his plane will never arrive. Magnetic millionaire JFK Jr., who changes the energy of a room just by being a Kennedy, is missing. At 2:15 a.m. on Saturday, the 17th of July, the Kennedy family contacts the Cape Cod Coast Guard. They tell them JFK Jr.'s plane has not arrived at Martha's Vineyard for a family wedding. At 4 a.m., the Coast Guard begins a search operation. The following day, the U.S. Air Force joins the search.
When the first news reports came out that John F. Kennedy Jr. was missing, that they couldn't find his plane, everyone could not believe it. It was like, not again. Could this be happening again to this beautiful, bright, exciting young man who was so full of life and everyone was so hoping was going to pick up the mantle of his father and lead this country at some point in his life? Could something have happened to him? And it took 3 long days before they found that plane. And when they did, everyone's hopes were dashed.
Finally, at 11:30 p.m. on Tuesday, July 20th, more than 3 days after the search began, Navy divers locate the fuselage of the plane on the ocean floor. But it's not until the following day that they find Kennedy, his wife, and his sister-in-law 7 miles off the coast on the bottom of the ocean, still belted to their seats, dead. The county medical examiner determines the victims died on impact. Neighbors and friends gather outside his apartment, tearfully leaving flowers and notes to Kennedy and his wife.
Reaction over John's death was a strange mix. It was almost generational. Anybody over 40, their hearts were just broken. This is the kid who we watched salute his dad's casket, and we just fell in love with him. We watched him grow up. Everybody in the country had hopes of him going into politics and bringing Camelot back into DC. This was somebody that everybody pinned their hopes on for politics. They wanted Kennedy back. But then the younger generation didn't have that connection. They didn't know that much about him. He was just the sexiest man alive and a guy that with a hot wife that looked great in a suit.
But the world's grief is nothing compared to that of Kennedy's sister, Caroline. With JFK Jr. gone, she is the last member of her immediate family remaining. Not an hour passes when I don't think of him. I kept thinking the door to my apartment would open and he'd come bounding into the room. On July 21st, 1999, the Kennedys and Bissetts cremate JFK Jr., Carolyn, and Lauren in the Mayflower Cemetery. Their remains are placed in a Tiffany blue cardboard box. The families finally agree to bury JFK Jr., Carolyn, and Lauren at sea.
According to reports, John had always wanted to be buried at sea. He asked people if anything should happen to him to bury him at sea. The strange thing is they buried him in the same sea where he was killed, so that's a little bit on the morbid side. But that was also the path to Martha's Vineyard where he grew up. So this is the water he loved. This is the water he grew up on. This is where he played and he learned to sail and he just did all the things little boys do when they're on the beach. So it kind of makes sense that this is where he would be buried.
The following morning, friends and family are taken out to the Navy destroyer USS Briscoe to scatter JFK Jr.'s, Carolyn, and Lauren's remains a few miles from the crash site.
So the Navy band play the saddest music ever. And when the ashes settle, they settle on the ocean. Some mourners throw flowers and letters from Carolyn and John's friends. Of course, this is a violation, but then the Coast Guards allow this to happen. There was not a dry eye on that ship.
Many flags across the country, including at the White House, are lowered to half-staff to honor the passing of John F. Kennedy Jr. The following day, the Kennedy family hosts a memorial mass at St. Thomas More Catholic Church in New York. JFK Jr.'s uncle, Senator Edward M. Kennedy, presents the eulogy in front of 315 mourners. He had a legacy, and he learned to treasure it. He was part of a legend, and he learned to live with it. He had amazing grace. Though Kennedy had never been savvy with money, gave vast sums to charity, and ran a failing magazine, at the time of his death, he's worth a reported $100 million.
Well, John had a trust fund set up from his grandfather, plus he inherited tens of millions of dollars when his mother passed away. And that doesn't even count his half interest in the Red Gate Farm. We're talking about 366 prime acreage in Martha's Vineyards, and the value of that just went up and up and up.
But who stands to inherit the fortune he left to his wife if she's dead?
If Carolyn predeceased JFK Jr., he wanted his real estate and personal property to go on to his nieces and nephews, Rose, John, and Tatiana, his sister's children. Now, we don't know who he left his money to through the trust, only the will, because once again, the trust is a private document. But there have been reports that he left his trust to his cousins, his sister Caroline, and various charities as well. It was even reported in his cousin RFK Jr.'s diary that he had received $250,000 from JFK Jr.'s trust estate.
A lot of people are wondering why Kennedy chose to leave his estate to his nieces and nephew.
It is possible that John was worried about the influence of Caroline's husband, who he didn't get along with.
Caroline's children also now own Kennedy's Tribeca apartment and his share of the Martha's Vineyard estate. 3 months after Kennedy's death, Caroline contacts Asheville Apache magazines, offering her brother's share of George for sale.
The publishing house was running George into the ground. Supposedly, they were reluctant to send out direct mail, and they didn't want to wait the normal 6 to 7 years to turn a profit. It was even reported that they were losing $200,000 each and every issue. At this point in time, it just made sense for Caroline to stop the bleeding and sell her brother's interest in George.
The proceeds of this sale are added to Kennedy's other funds and sent to a multi-million-dollar trust. Thanks to Kennedy's careful legal planning, his estate is settled quickly, or so it seems. 6 months after Kennedy's death, Bisset's mother, driven by grief, wants a piece of his estate. If she doesn't get it, she's prepared to sue Kennedy for the wrongful death of her daughters. From his birth at the Camelot White House to his life as a much-loved New York socialite, JFK Jr. has been in the public eye more than any other celebrity. And now in death, the media still can't get enough of him or the legacy he's left behind. And nor can his mother-in-law. As investigators look into the cause of the crash that killed Kennedy and her daughters, she believes her son-in-law is to blame. The National Transportation Safety Board discovers that the plane's debris reveals no sign of mechanical problems. 1 year after the accident, the board determines the cause of the plane crash.
The National Transportation Safety Board found that John F. Kennedy Jr. was the cause of the crash due to not being able to maintain control of the plane when he was trying to land over water in the dark. This is a very difficult thing to do, and he did not have that much experience flying in the dark.
After it was determined that pilot error caused the crash, Carolyn's mother filed a wrongful death suit. It was her right to do that, but she came under a lot of criticism for it. But you have to remember, this woman lost 2 daughters in this accident.
Clearly there was a lot of emotion, a lot of heartache, and a lot of pain involved. The 2 families were able to keep this lawsuit fairly private, and after 2 years, they were able to settle it. The rumors were that the settlement was around $15 million, but the attorneys would not confirm that number.
It's really hard to put a monetary value on the life of 2 lost daughters. And here, while John Kennedy Jr. was found at fault for the accident, his wife and her sister did get into that plane knowing that he had very limited flying experience and that he was on crutches, so they assumed some of the risk of this happening. Those kind of factors, plus the negativity and the ugliness that a public lawsuit would reveal, really caused everybody to come to a quick settlement.
Kennedy's sister Caroline sells off his Tribeca apartment. In April 2000, actor Edward Burns buys the loft for a reported $2.5 million, more than 3.5 times what Kennedy paid for it just 6 years earlier. The money goes into the existing trust for the Schlossberg Kennedy children. In March 2001, Kennedy's former magazine, George, folds.
Right after JFK Jr. passed away, there was a spike in sales, but the advertising revenue plummeted shortly after that. Now that JFK Jr. was out of the picture, the magic and allure of the Kennedy name was no longer there. One of the best things for JFK Jr.'s legacy would have been if George was a huge success, but unfortunately it wasn't. And so it was very smart of Caroline to sell the interest in the magazine when she did.
In May 2013, Caroline lists 90 acres of the family's waterfront Martha's Vineyard property for sale for $45 million. The sale, once complete, will mean an injection of $22.5 million into her brother's estate. JFK Jr., the crown prince of America's royal family, had something that no actor nor athlete could emulate: the magic of being a Kennedy.
The Kennedy name still has that mystique and allure to it. They're even considered American royalty. And remember, the Kennedy legacy is one of politics, education, and charities that many of the members of the Kennedy family are still carrying on to this day.
I think John F. Kennedy Jr.'s death was a tragedy for everyone in America, whether Republican or Democrat. I think that his life, his charisma, and his ideals transcended both parties and really brought out the best in the American way, in the American people.
John's legacy continues because we're just not quite ready to give up Camelot. And he was the last one that had the looks, had the charisma, had the charm, had everything that you would want in your Prince Charming. There are no other Kennedys that meet that criteria at this point, so there's a big loss. There have been other families like the Bushes and the Clintons and the Obamas and the Reagans that have had families grow up in the White House, but nobody comes close to the Kennedys. The whole mystique around Camelot, the style of Jackie Kennedy, the charm of John Kennedy, we haven't been able to follow that. It's a hard act to follow.